So we have a very basic web page, although it's, it doesn't have anything in it currently, but it does have all the layout here. What I would like to do now is actually just talk about HTML really briefly, just so you get an understanding of how the program works. At its core, what HTML is, it is basically Word. So if you are familiar with Microsoft Word, that's what you're doing. So when you're in Microsoft Word, right, you will write stuff out, right? Just whatever, okay? What you can then do is that you can take just plain text and you can treat it as a heading style, right? Or I could treat it as a title, or we could do emphasis, or we could do a heading 2. There's all these pre-built ones in here. List paragraph, right? We could also take that content and actually just make it a bulleted list and then type stuff, okay? What you do with HTML is that you're doing the same thing as you would do here, where I could hit, enter, and we could, tab things in, all of that. The difference is that we're here, all we see is the visual. We have no idea what is actually happening in the program itself, right? What's happening, what's making it, telling it to do these things. When you work inside of here, we actually do see what we're writing. So for instance, if I wanted to do a heading, we'll just use this insert over here, and you don't have to do this. I'll just go ahead and I'll do a heading 1. You'll see that, oh, there's a heading, right? And then after that, I'm just going to, down in the code view here, I'm going to go, I want to do a paragraph. And there's a paragraph. And then down here, we'll do an unordered list. And then inside the unordered list, I'll do a list item, blah, 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 blah. And then we'll do another list item, blah, 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 and so on and so forth, okay? Now, this, if you were to look at this without seeing the little lines here, you'd say this looks a little bit like Word. The difference is that I can actually see what is happening, the way it's being portrayed inside of here. And that actually gives you a lot of strength because it allows you to, I'm sure you've been in Word and like things get tabbed over and you're like, why does this keep getting tabbed over? I try to get rid of it because you don't have access to it. Here I do. Like, so if I wanted the beginning one here and I'm like, oh, it's, or this paragraph, I want it to, be a heading, I could just take that at P, make it an H2, and this an H2, and then now it's a heading 2. And I can also look for errors and oddities and things that just aren't working correctly. So for instance, I might go inside of here and I accidentally made another unordered list, and then I did a list item, and I was like, oh, why is that like tabbed in? I don't understand. But I can look in here and realize, oh, there's an unordered list inside of that where there shouldn't be one. And then I could just take out those ULs. All right. What HTML is, as far as I'm concerned, because that's all we're going to do in this class, is what we call a markup language. So the idea is that you have this opening tag and this closing tag, and all the content that's in between it, which is typically text. It can be images and other things, but it's almost always text for the most part, until we actually put pictures in there. All this, the content that's in between will be treated what it goes in between these two. So you'll notice that you have this H1, and then you have the same H1 here, but it has this forward slash. So this is the opening tag and the closing tag, and this all together with its content, it would be called an element. So this is one element. And then this is the next element. And then you can do something such as I did right here. Let me just make this look a little bit cleaner. Where you can have an element, right? So I have this unordered list. Here's the beginning of the list. This is the end of the list. And then nested inside of it, I have list items. So each one of these is an item inside of that, okay? So, and there's another thing I'm going to show you in a little bit where you can do divs. And divs is what this is here. And all that does is let you group things. Just look at div as like a folder. And then later on when you want to apply stuff, you will realize you can grab a whole section and like color that whole section by targeting the div that it's in. So, I could grab like this whole bit and make it a div wraparound selection. And now that's inside of this div. And then I could have a different one here. Oops. moved it on accident. I could have a different div wrapping around this one. Go ahead and I want to wrap around. Okay, I guess an insertion point. Oh, it just did that. Well, whatever. So I have that div, and then I have this, and then I have this div, and now you can see it. This is all wrapped around it. So I can grab this whole section and do stuff to it, okay? Or apply, you'll see later on, design elements to just this section, and one for this section as well. That's how HTML works in general. Now we're going to be using, instead of typing it by hand, which is how I teach in the web design class, if you've been in it. So if we want to do a P, we go blah, 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 and I would type up by hand. We're going to use the interface to create our elements here. But I do want you to understand, because it makes it a little bit easier to read if you understand exactly why we're doing the things that we're doing. So even if we look at this document in general, so I'm going to get rid of all of this here. What you are going to notice, let me go to code, is that I don't want to get into what all these things are, but this just says it's an HTML document. This says where HTML starts, and then this is where it ends. So notice that there's an opening HTML and an ending one. It does have this property, this attribute applied to it, but don't worry about that. In essence, it's just telling us a little bit extra information. So that's the beginning. Then it has this head. Now notice when I click on the head, it shows me where the closing tag is for head, and then there's the body, and that's the closing one. What you need to know about that is that the opening one is extra information. It's not where your actual content is shown. And the body is where you actually put your content. It goes inside of this. This is what's actually going to be seen by the user or whoever's reading your web page. Okay, that's the kind of lump sum of it. Hopefully that made a little bit more sense, because what we're going to do is we're going to start using these elements over here in order to make our web page. But I just wanted to quickly just kind of explain what we're doing. Now, there's all sorts of them, but luckily enough, you don't have to memorize any of the HTML tags. And there's also, oops, not there. There's also, we're going to use these HTML ones. These are just the generic. And there's also this Bootstrap components. These are just pre-made HTML configured components that will kind of do the same thing, but they have more, they're like pre-written bits. Like watch, if I do carousel, you're going to see it's a whole bunch. Like here's an ordered list. There's an OL, and then these are the list items, right? And then you can see a div. It's just pre-written HTML components that utilize the Bootstrap, that utilize the right elements, okay? So we're going to be using these as well between the HTML and the Bootstrap, okay? Just because Bootstrap makes it a little bit easier to write the code, and it will also make it responsive. Hopefully that makes sense. So you didn't have to do anything on this one. In fact, I didn't want you to. And the next one we'll actually start laying this out. But we might need to utilize a little bit of the coding in order to make it work the way that I want.